Early life and education of Che Guevara. Ernesto Rafael Guevara de la Serna, commonly known as Che Guevara, was born on June 14, 1928 in the city of Rosario, Argentina. His early years were marked by both privilege and personal challenges, which played a pivotal role in shaping his later revolutionary path. Raised in a middle-class family with a strong intellectual influence, Che's experiences and observations during his formative years would deeply influence his political ideology and commitment to social change. Family background and early childhood. Che Guevara was born into an Argentine family with both Spanish and Irish ancestry. His father, Ernesto Guevara Lynch, was a successful civil engineer and a fervent anti-imperialist who had a significant influence on Che's worldview. His mother, Celia de la Serna, was a strong-willed woman who had a great impact on his upbringing. She was an important figure in his early life, encouraging his intellectual curiosity and instilling a sense of justice and empathy. Though Che's family was relatively affluent, they experienced a degree of economic instability due to his father's career. They moved frequently during his early years, living in various cities across Argentina. Despite the family's relative comfort, Che would later come to resent the social inequalities he saw around him and the divide between the wealthy elite and the oppressed working class in Argentina. Che's early health problems also played a significant role in shaping his character. At the age of 2, he was diagnosed with a severe case of asthma, which would trouble him throughout his life. This physical weakness often led him to be introspective, developing a strong internal life and the habit of reading extensively, which helped form his intellectual and ideological foundation. During his childhood, Che's parents were supportive of his intellectual pursuits, and his early exposure to books and intellectual discussions would later influence his revolutionary mindset. Education in Argentina and early intellectual development. Che Guevara attended a number of schools during his early life due to his family's frequent relocations. However, it was his time in the city of Córdoba that marked a significant phase in his intellectual development. In Córdoba, Che enrolled at the National University of Córdoba, one of the most prestigious institutions in Argentina. It was here that he began to explore more deeply the socio-political landscape of Argentina and Latin America. During his university years, Che studied medicine, although he would later admit that he was not particularly interested in becoming a doctor. Instead, his studies were largely motivated by his desire to understand the poverty and suffering that he saw in the world around him. In particular, he was influenced by the injustices faced by the poor and marginalized communities in Argentina, a perspective that would later define his revolutionary vision. Che's time at the University of Buenos Aires was marked by a deep intellectual engagement with Marxism and other radical ideologies. He became increasingly interested in the writings of Marx, Engels, and Lenin, which shaped his understanding of class struggle, imperialism, and the necessity of revolution. His time at the university exposed him to various political movements and debates, which would later inform his involvement in revolutionary activities. The Motorcycle Diaries, a transformative journey. One of the most crucial experiences in Che Guevara's early life was his journey through Latin America, which would later be immortalized in the book The Motorcycle Diaries. In 1951, Che, along with his friend Alberto Granado, embarked on a road trip across South America on a beat-up motorcycle. The journey took them through Argentina, Chile, Peru, Colombia, Venezuela, and other countries in the region. What began as a simple adventure quickly became a transformative experience for Guevara. Throughout the journey, Che encountered the widespread poverty, exploitation, and social inequality that existed in many Latin American countries. The conditions he observed during this trip profoundly shaped his views on economic inequality, imperialism, and the need for social change. One of the most significant moments of the journey occurred when Che visited a leper colony in the Peruvian jungle. The sight of lepers living in squalid conditions, ignored and abandoned by society, deeply affected him. It was here that he came to understand the deep systemic issues that kept people in poverty and suffering. This experience solidified his commitment to fighting for the oppressed and marginalized people of Latin America. The Motorcycle Diaries was not only a physical journey but also a personal one for Che. It marked the moment when his views shifted from intellectual reflection to direct engagement with the world around him. By the end of the journey, Che had resolved to dedicate his life to the cause of revolution, believing that only through armed struggle and revolutionary movements could the social and economic injustices of Latin America be addressed. The influence of Marxism and political awakening. Upon returning to Argentina after his travels, Che Guevara became increasingly involved in political and social issues. He recognized that the political systems in many Latin American countries, including Argentina, were controlled by corrupt elites who maintained the status quo of exploitation and oppression. In particular, he became deeply critical of the influence of U.S. imperialism in the region, which he saw as a force that exacerbated inequality and poverty. Che's political awakening was heavily influenced by Marxist ideology. He believed that the only way to achieve genuine liberation for the people of Latin America was through armed revolution. In his view, the traditional political structures, which were largely controlled by the ruling elites, were incapable of addressing the fundamental problems of society. Marxism, with its focus on class struggle and the overthrow of capitalist systems, provided a theoretical framework for Che's revolutionary activities. This period also marked Che's growing involvement with left-wing political movements in Argentina. He began to attend meetings and engage with radical intellectuals and activists, learning more about Marxism, Leninism, and the works of revolutionary thinkers such as Karl Marx, Leon Trotsky, and José Carlos Mariátegui, an influential Peruvian Marxist. These ideas would later guide Che's actions as he became increasingly committed to the revolutionary struggle. Meeting Fidel Castro and joining the Cuban Revolution. Che Guevara's political journey took a decisive turn when he met Fidel Castro in 1955. Guevara had already formed a deep desire to take action against the oppressive systems he had encountered in Latin America, and Castro's vision of revolutionary change resonated strongly with him. The two men shared a common goal: to overthrow the corrupt governments of Latin America and replace them with systems based on social justice and equality. Fidel Castro and his brother Raúl had been exiled in Mexico after their failed attempt to overthrow the Cuban dictator Fulgencio Batista. They were organizing a guerrilla movement to launch a revolution in Cuba, and they needed experienced revolutionaries to join their cause. Che Guevara, who had by this time fully embraced revolutionary ideology, joined the movement and quickly became one of its most important leaders. His experience with guerrilla warfare, his ideological commitment, and his medical background made him an ideal candidate to join Castro's 26th of July movement. In 1956, Guevara joined Castro and a small group of revolutionaries on the Granma yacht to sail to Cuba and begin their armed struggle against Batista's regime. Over the course of the next few years, Guevara played a key role in the Cuban Revolution, eventually becoming one of the most prominent figures in the movement. Conclusion: early life and legacy. Che Guevara's early life and education were marked by a combination of privileged intellectual development and personal struggles. His experiences in Argentina and Latin America shaped his views on social justice, imperialism, and revolution. His journey through South America opened his eyes to the harsh realities faced by the poor and oppressed, and it was during this time that he made the decision to dedicate his life to fighting for their rights. Che's education, both formal and intellectual, laid the foundation for his later involvement in the Cuban Revolution and his broader revolutionary efforts across Latin America. His commitment to Marxism and his belief in the necessity of armed struggle to bring about change were central to his worldview. By the time he met Fidel Castro and joined the Cuban revolutionaries, Che had already developed a deep sense of purpose and a burning desire to bring about radical change in Latin America. In summary, the early life and education of Che Guevara were crucial to shaping his revolutionary ideology and providing the foundation for his later activism. His personal experiences with poverty, his intellectual engagement with radical ideologies, and his travels across Latin America all played key roles in his evolution from a medical student to one of the most iconic figures of the 20th century revolution. Che Guevara's revolutionary activities. Ernesto Che Guevara, often considered the embodiment of revolution in Latin America and beyond, dedicated much of his life to the struggle against imperialism, exploitation, and the oppressive social structures in Latin American societies. His revolutionary activities, particularly in Cuba, made him an iconic figure of the 20th century, but his efforts did not stop there. Che's desire for global revolution took him to other parts of Latin America and beyond. This section delves into his pivotal revolutionary activities, his role in the Cuban Revolution, his political and military leadership, and his efforts to spread revolutionary movements across the globe. The path to the Cuban Revolution. Che Guevara's journey into revolutionary politics began in earnest after his transformative journey across Latin America in 1951–1952. The two main influences that shaped Guevara's thinking during this period were his experiences seeing the effects of poverty and social injustice in many countries and his exposure to Marxist ideology. By the time Guevara crossed paths with Fidel Castro and his brother Raúl, Che had already developed a strong conviction that revolution was the only solution to the systemic inequality in Latin America. In 1955, Guevara met Fidel Castro in Mexico, where Castro and other exiles were planning the overthrow of the Cuban dictator Fulgencio Batista. At the time, Castro's group, known as the 26th of July movement, was organizing an armed insurgency. Despite not knowing each other well, Guevara's commitment to revolution, his medical background, and his ideological alignment with the movement's goals made him an ideal ally. Soon after meeting Castro, Che joined the movement, recognizing the opportunity to fight for a revolutionary cause that mirrored his ideals. The Guerrilla War in Cuba 1956–1959. In December 1956, Guevara joined the Granma expedition, which sought to land in Cuba and initiate a guerrilla war against Batista's government. The trip was ill-fated initially, as only a small fraction of the fighters survived the initial landing. However, Guevara, along with a handful of other survivors, including Fidel and Raúl Castro, retreated to the Sierra Maestra Mountains to regroup and launch a sustained guerrilla campaign. Che Guevara quickly distinguished himself for his leadership, military acumen, and unwavering ideological commitment. As a member of the 26th of July movement, Guevara was not just a fighter, but also a symbol of revolutionary dedication. His skills as a military strategist and his ability to win over the local peasantry helped to expand the guerrilla forces in the mountains. By winning over rural communities and gaining their support, Guevara's forces were able to conduct effective hit-and-run attacks, sabotage operations, and gradually erode the strength of Batista's military presence. Guevara's role in the guerrilla war extended beyond that of a military commander. He also took on a leadership position in the ideological training of the revolutionary soldiers. He was deeply committed to the notion of revolutionary war as a process of political and ideological transformation, not just military conquest. Guevara understood that for a revolution to succeed, it needed the support of the people, particularly the impoverished and marginalized, whose participation was essential for the insurgents to succeed in overthrowing a deeply entrenched dictatorship. Guevara was heavily involved in educating the guerrillas in Marxist theory, anti-imperialism, and the importance of class struggle, ensuring that the army wasn't just a military force but a movement committed to broader social change. The Cuban Revolution's victory. The Cuban Revolution culminated on January 1, 1959, with the fall of Batista's regime and the triumph of the revolutionary forces. Che Guevara, by this point, had become one of the most prominent figures in the revolutionary leadership. His military expertise and unwavering dedication to the cause of socialism earned him a key role in the post-revolutionary Cuban government. After the victory, Guevara was appointed to several key positions within the new Cuban government. He became a member of the Revolutionary Triumvirate alongside Fidel and Raúl Castro. Guevara was appointed to the position of commander of the Cuban Armed Forces and played a significant role in consolidating the new socialist government. He also served as the president of the National Bank of Cuba and as the Minister of Industry, where he worked on implementing radical economic reforms that reflected his vision of a Marxist state. Guevara's contributions to the post-revolutionary Cuban government were notable, particularly his role in the nationalization of industries and land reforms. He was an advocate for collectivized agriculture and worked towards implementing policies that would reduce inequality in Cuban society. His drive for social justice and his revolutionary zeal meant that he was often at odds with other members of the government who were more pragmatic and willing to make compromises with capitalist structures. Guevara's desire for radical change sometimes created tensions, but his commitment to the principles of socialism and his belief in economic equality remained unshaken. Che Guevara's role as a global revolutionary. Though Che Guevara played a critical role in the Cuban Revolution, His revolutionary vision extended beyond the borders of Cuba. Guevara was convinced that for true liberation to be achieved in Latin America, revolutions would need to spread across the entire region. His experiences in Cuba led him to believe that the Cuban Revolution could serve as an example for other countries, especially in Latin America where similar conditions of poverty, exploitation, and oppression existed. Che's belief in the necessity of spreading revolution led him to take part in multiple international revolutionary movements. After the success of the Cuban Revolution, Guevara traveled to Africa and Latin America to offer his expertise and support for revolutionary movements. His first significant international mission after the revolution was to assist in the revolutionary struggle in the Congo 1965, where he attempted to organize a guerrilla war against the pro-Western government of the Congo. Unfortunately, the mission in Congo was a failure. Guevara's forces struggled to gain popular support, and the mission failed to achieve its objectives. He later reflected on this failure and admitted that it was a mistake to assume that a similar revolution could be organized in a different context without fully understanding the local political and social dynamics. However, Guevara was not deterred by his failures in the Congo. He believed that revolutionary struggle was a process that required constant adaptation and learning. The experience in Congo, though a disappointment, provided Guevara with valuable lessons that would inform his later efforts in Bolivia. Despite the setbacks, Guevara remained a steadfast believer in the necessity of revolutionary movements across the globe. His vision was internationalist, and he sought to link the struggles of oppressed peoples in various parts of the world. The Bolivia mission and death. Che Guevara's final revolutionary mission took him to Bolivia, where he hoped to initiate a new guerrilla war. By 1966, Guevara had become disillusioned with the idea that the Cuban Revolution could be an isolated success. He believed that for the revolution to endure, it needed to spread to other parts of Latin America. Bolivia, with its deep social inequalities and weak political institutions, was an ideal location for Guevara to attempt to export revolution. Guevara believed that a successful revolution in Bolivia could inspire other movements across Latin America. Che's efforts to spark a revolution in Bolivia, however, were fraught with difficulty. Unlike in Cuba, where he had enjoyed the support of the rural peasantry, Guevara faced challenges in Bolivia that made it harder to build a strong base of support. The Bolivian government, with the help of U.S. military advisors, quickly targeted Guevara's forces, and the guerrillas struggled to gain traction among the rural population. Additionally, the local Communist Party in Bolivia was divided and fragmented, leaving Guevara without critical political support. The failure to mobilize sufficient numbers of people, and the poor coordination among the guerrilla forces led to Guevara's eventual capture. On October 8, 1967, Che Guevara was captured by Bolivian forces with the assistance of the CIA. Despite attempts to negotiate his release or offer him asylum, Guevara was executed the following day on October 9, 1967. His death was a tragic and symbolic moment, marking the end of his direct involvement in revolutionary struggles, but the beginning of his global legacy as a martyr for revolutionary causes. Legacy and impact of Che Guevara's revolutionary activities. Che Guevara's revolutionary activities and his commitment to socialist principles left an indelible mark on the world. His role in the Cuban Revolution made him a symbol of resistance against imperialism and capitalist oppression, and his image as a revolutionary icon continues to resonate with movements around the world. Even after his death, Guevara's legacy has been used to inspire revolutionary movements and uprisings across the globe. His life and actions have been mythologized and politicized, with his image often serving as a rallying cry for activists and revolutionaries. Guevara's commitment to his ideals, even in the face of failure and death, turned him into a martyr for revolutionary causes, cementing his place as one of the most iconic figures in 20th century history. Che's impact was not limited to Cuba or Latin America. His ideas and actions contributed to the global discourse on revolution, resistance, and the possibility of social change. Guevara's determination to spread revolution beyond national borders and his belief in the international struggle for liberation continue to inspire those seeking social justice, liberation, and freedom from oppression. In conclusion, Che Guevara's revolutionary activities were marked by an unwavering commitment to the ideals of socialism, anti-imperialism, and the liberation of the oppressed. From his role in the Cuban Revolution to his international efforts in Africa and Bolivia, Guevara's dedication to these causes defined much of his life. Though his revolutionary activities were not always successful, his impact on global movements for social change and his enduring legacy as a symbol of resistance remain significant. Che Guevara's ideology and political beliefs. Ernesto Che Guevara is perhaps one of the most significant figures in the 20th century revolutionary movements. His ideology, shaped by Marxism, Leninism, and his own experiences in revolutionary warfare, became the foundation of his beliefs and actions throughout his life. His ideas on class struggle, imperialism, the role of armed struggle, and his vision for the future of Latin America and the world at large left an indelible mark on the global political landscape. This section will delve deeply into Guevara's political philosophy, tracing his ideological development and its practical application in the various movements he engaged with throughout his life. Early influences and the formation of Che Guevara's political beliefs. Che Guevara's early life was shaped by his personal experiences, academic education, and the political climate of Latin America. Raised in a middle-class family in Argentina, Guevara was exposed to the realities of social inequality and economic oppression at a young age. However, it was his travels across Latin America that fundamentally shaped his understanding of the world. His journey across the continent in 1951–1952, which he documented in the Motorcycle Diaries, was a pivotal moment in his intellectual development. During this trip, Che witnessed the widespread poverty and exploitation that characterized much of the region. His encounters with the indigenous peoples in Peru and Bolivia, the desperate conditions in Argentina's rural areas, and the systemic corruption and inequality present in other Latin American countries led him to reject the prevailing capitalist systems and adopt a more radical view of socio-economic change. Che's exposure to Marxist ideas during his time in Guatemala in the early 1950s deepened his understanding of social structures. There, he encountered the leftist government of Jacobo Arbenz, whose land reform efforts were being undermined by U.S. imperialism. The coup that overthrew Arbenz in 1954, backed by the CIA, was a defining moment for Guevara, solidifying his commitment to the idea that imperialism, especially the influence of the United States, was one of the greatest sources of oppression in the Third World. This event would later influence his staunch anti-imperialism, particularly his belief that revolution was necessary to resist foreign domination and to bring about genuine independence for Latin American nations. Che's commitment to Marxism and Leninism. Che Guevara was deeply influenced by the works of Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin. Marx's theory of historical materialism, which asserts that the course of history is driven by the struggle between classes, became the cornerstone of Guevara's political analysis. For Che, the primary contradiction of modern society was the exploitation of the working class, the proletariat, by the capitalist class, the bourgeoisie, and the solution to this problem was the overthrow of capitalist systems through revolutionary means. Guevara's interpretation of Marxism was heavily influenced by his experiences in Latin America, where he saw the overwhelming wealth and power of the few in contrast to the widespread poverty of the many. His commitment to Marxist theory led him to view imperialism as a central force of exploitation in the world, particularly in Latin America, where U.S. corporations had significant economic and political influence. Che's early writings, especially his book Guerrilla Warfare 1960, reflect his Marxist-Leninist beliefs, where he emphasized the role of the working class, the importance of class struggle, and the necessity of revolutionary action. Lenin's theory of the vanguard party also had a lasting impact on Che's political thinking. However, while Guevara agreed with Lenin's view that a revolutionary party was essential to guide the working class toward a successful revolution, he believed that the revolution itself should be primarily led by the peasants, who made up the majority of the population in many Third World countries. This was a crucial deviation from traditional Marxist thought, which emphasized the role of the urban proletariat in revolution. Guevara's experiences in the Cuban Revolution, where the rural peasants played a decisive role, reinforced this belief in the revolutionary potential of the peasantry. The concept of the new man. One of Che Guevara's most significant ideological contributions was his concept of the nuevo hombre, new man. Guevara argued that the success of any revolution depended not only on the overthrow of the capitalist system but also on the creation of a new kind of person, one who was selfless, committed to the collective good, and willing to work for the greater good of society. According to Guevara, the new man would prioritize communal values over individualism, which he saw as a product of capitalist societies. In his view, the new man was motivated not by material incentives, but by a sense of social responsibility and solidarity with others. In a post-revolutionary society, Guevara believed, individuals would no longer be driven by the pursuit of profit and personal gain, but by the desire to contribute to the common good. This vision was deeply rooted in Guevara's Marxist-Leninist beliefs but also reflected his desire to reshape human consciousness in a way that transcended capitalist values. To create the new man, Guevara believed that education, ideological training, and revolutionary action were essential. For him, the individual's personal transformation was inseparable from the larger goal of social revolution. His notion of the new man was not just about individual self-improvement, but about collective solidarity and a shared commitment to social justice. This vision of the new man was one of the driving forces behind Guevara's advocacy for radical political and economic reforms in Cuba and his subsequent attempts to export revolution to other parts of Latin America and Africa. The role of armed struggle in revolution. Che Guevara was a staunch advocate of armed struggle as a necessary means of achieving revolution. He believed that the ruling elites would never willingly relinquish power, and that the oppressed people of the world had no choice but to take up arms to overthrow the status quo. For Guevara, armed struggle was not just a military necessity but a moral imperative. His own experience in the Cuban Revolution convinced him that guerrilla warfare could serve as a highly effective tool for achieving revolutionary goals, especially in rural and underdeveloped areas where conventional warfare would not be feasible. Che's views on armed struggle were articulated in his influential book Guerrilla Warfare, where he emphasized the importance of small, mobile guerrilla units that could operate within local populations. He argued that guerrillas should blend into the community, gain the support of the people, and gradually weaken the enemy's power by targeting vulnerable points in the enemy's infrastructure and supply lines. Guevara's emphasis on the role of the peasantry as a base for revolutionary action was also reflected in his theory of the FOCO, the idea that revolution could be sparked by a small, determined group of revolutionaries, the FOCO, who would ignite the masses into action. This theory would later inform his revolutionary campaigns in Bolivia and other countries. Che's focus on armed struggle was linked to his deep belief in the necessity of revolutionary violence. He did not see violence as an inherent evil but as a necessary tool for dismantling unjust systems of power. Guevara viewed the existing state apparatus, with its military and police forces, as inherently violent and oppressive. For this reason, he argued, any attempt to challenge the system must be met with resistance, including the use of force. In his view, revolution was not just a political struggle but a struggle to reshape society at its core, and this required both physical and ideological combat. Anti-imperialism and global revolution. Imperialism, particularly in the form of U.S. economic and political dominance, was a central theme in Guevara's political philosophy. He was an ardent critic of the United States' interventionist policies in Latin America, and he saw U.S. imperialism as a major force behind the poverty and exploitation that plagued the region. Guevara was especially critical of the economic practices of U.S. corporations, which he believed were extracting wealth from Latin America while leaving the local populations in poverty. For Guevara, the struggle against imperialism was not just a national issue but a global one. He believed that the liberation of Latin America could not occur in isolation, and that revolutionary movements needed to unite against the common enemy of imperialism. His experiences in the Cuban Revolution reinforced this view, as Cuba's victory was seen not only as a triumph for the Cuban people but as a victory for all oppressed people in the Third World. Guevara's commitment to global revolution led him to participate in revolutionary movements in Africa and South America, with the aim of creating a wave of uprisings that would overthrow imperialist powers and bring about socialist transformation across the world. Guevara's vision of a global revolution was informed by his belief that the imperialist system could only be defeated through coordinated action by revolutionary movements around the world. He argued that the fight against imperialism was not just about national liberation but about building international solidarity among the oppressed people of the world. Guevara's internationalism was central to his political philosophy and guided his efforts to support and train revolutionary forces outside of Cuba, including his ill-fated mission in the Congo and his final campaign in Bolivia. Che's legacy and continuing influence. Che Guevara's ideological contributions have had a profound and lasting impact on revolutionary movements worldwide. His writings, speeches, and actions continue to inspire activists, political leaders, and social movements around the globe. His vision of a just society based on solidarity, collective responsibility, and the overthrow of oppressive systems resonates with those fighting against imperialism, capitalism, and social inequality. However, Guevara's ideas have also been criticized by some for their perceived authoritarianism and their emphasis on violence as a means of achieving political ends. Despite these critiques, Che Guevara remains a symbol of resistance, an enduring figure in the struggle for social justice. His image has been used by countless political movements, from left-wing and anti-imperialist groups to grassroots organizations advocating for workers' rights, indigenous rights, and the rights of the oppressed. His life and thought continue to spark debate and inspire action in a world still grappling with issues of inequality, exploitation, and the legacy of imperialism. Conclusion: the enduring influence of Che Guevara's ideology. Che Guevara's political beliefs and ideological contributions continue to be highly relevant in today's world. His commitment to Marxism, his emphasis on the need for revolution to achieve true social and economic justice, and his vision for a world free from imperialism have made him a lasting figure in revolutionary thought. Guevara's radical approach to revolution, his belief in the power of the people to overthrow oppressive systems, and his internationalism are all key aspects of his ideology that continue to inspire movements for change. Che Guevara's legacy and influence. Che Guevara, a figure whose life was marked by revolutionary fervor and commitment to global social justice, left an enduring legacy that transcends borders and continues to influence political movements around the world. From his role in the Cuban Revolution to his dedication to global uprisings, Guevara's impact extends far beyond his death in 1967. His image, ideals, and revolutionary actions have been incorporated into political ideologies, activist movements, and even pop culture, cementing his status as a global icon. This section explores the lasting influence of Che Guevara, considering his legacy in the context of global revolutions, social movements, and his symbolic role in contemporary politics. The iconic image of Che Guevara. Perhaps one of the most enduring aspects of Che Guevara's legacy is his image. The famous photograph of him, taken by Cuban photographer Alberto Corta in 1960, has become a global symbol of rebellion, resistance, and revolutionary spirit. The image, known as Guerrilla Heroico, depicts Guevara in a contemplative pose, exuding a sense of defiance and determination. This photograph has been reproduced in countless forms and has become one of the most recognized portraits in history. The widespread use of Guevara's image began shortly after his death and exploded in the 1980s, particularly during the rise of countercultural movements. This image has been embraced by many, from left-wing political activists to individuals in the global counterculture who identify with Guevara's fight for social justice and resistance to imperialism. Despite his Marxist and revolutionary ideals being grounded in socialist thought, Guevara's image has been widely commercialized, appearing on t-shirts, posters, graffiti, and countless other products. Some critics argue that this commercialization strips Guevara of his political meaning, reducing him to an image of rebellion without substance. However, this commodification reflects the widespread recognition and appeal of Guevara's figure, regardless of the political context in which it is used. For many activists and political groups, Guevara's image remains a potent symbol of defiance against inequality and exploitation. His image has been used in various movements, from anti-imperialist protests to social justice campaigns, signifying an ongoing connection to Guevara's ideals and revolutionary vision. The continued use of his image in protests and demonstrations reinforces the notion that his legacy lives on as a symbol of resistance. Guevara's impact on Latin American politics. Che Guevara's legacy is most directly felt in Latin America, where his revolutionary actions were rooted in the socio-political context of the time. The Cuban Revolution, in which Guevara played a pivotal role, had profound effects on the political landscape of Latin America. The success of the Cuban Revolution in 1959 inspired numerous leftist movements throughout the region, providing a model for guerrilla warfare and revolution against US-backed dictatorships. Guevara's insistence on the possibility of revolutionary change through armed struggle led to the rise of various insurgent movements in countries such as Argentina, Nicaragua, Colombia, and El Salvador. In the 1960s and 1970s, Guevara became an enduring figure for revolutionary movements across Latin America, as his ideology was used to fuel resistance against the continued presence of U.S. imperialism and local authoritarian regimes. Guevara's belief in the importance of armed struggle, the role of guerrilla warfare, and his commitment to the liberation of oppressed people resonated deeply with many Latin American leftists. His approach to revolution, which emphasized the importance of unity between workers and peasants and the necessity of a vanguard to guide the revolution, continued to inform insurgent movements during this period. However, Guevara's legacy in Latin America is also a contested one. In countries such as Bolivia, where Guevara attempted to incite a revolutionary movement, his campaign ultimately ended in failure. Despite his unwavering commitment to the cause, Guevara was unable to gain sufficient support from the local population, and his efforts were thwarted by a combination of internal political factors and external opposition. Nevertheless, Guevara's influence remains significant in the region, where his revolutionary ideals continue to inspire political and social movements that challenge inequality, authoritarianism, and imperialism. In the post-revolutionary period in Cuba, Guevara's contributions to the country's economic and social reforms continue to be part of the national narrative. His vision of a socialist economy, which emphasized the collectivization of agriculture and the centralization of industry, was integral to Cuba's early years after the revolution. Guevara's commitment to economic equality and his belief in the importance of moral incentives over material rewards marked his time as Cuba's Minister of Industry and President of the National Bank. While some of his economic policies have been criticized as overly idealistic, they remain a testament to his vision of a radically transformed society. Guevara's influence on global revolutionary movements. While Guevara's influence in Latin America is particularly significant, his legacy also extends to other regions of the world. Guevara's belief in the universality of revolution and his commitment to anti-imperialist struggles resonated with liberation movements in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. After the Cuban Revolution, Guevara sought to spread revolutionary ideas beyond Cuba, advocating for global movements that would challenge imperialist powers and create new socialist societies. One of Guevara's most significant international missions was his involvement in the Congo in 1965, where he attempted to assist in the organization of a guerrilla war against the pro-Western government. His failure in the Congo, however, did not deter him. Guevara believed that revolutions were not bound by national borders, and that the fight for liberation needed to be international in scope. His later attempt to ignite a revolution in Bolivia, though unsuccessful, further solidified his belief in the global character of revolutionary struggle. In Africa, Guevara's involvement in revolutionary movements was not limited to the Congo. He also sought to support insurgencies in countries such as Algeria and Egypt, where the anti-colonial struggle against European imperial powers had sparked movements for independence. Guevara's ideas influenced liberation struggles across the African continent, particularly in countries where revolutionary movements sought to dismantle colonialism and neo-imperialism. Guevara's internationalism was a defining feature of his political ideology, as he believed that revolutionaries worldwide should stand united against common imperialist foes. In Asia, Guevara's influence was felt most strongly in countries such as Vietnam, where his ideas were aligned with the goals of the Vietnamese liberation movement. Ho Chi Minh, the leader of North Vietnam, shared many of Guevara's views on armed struggle and the need for solidarity among oppressed peoples. Guevara's ideas about guerrilla warfare, class struggle, and the role of peasants in revolution found resonance in the context of Vietnam's protracted war against both French colonialism and U.S. imperialism. Moreover, Guevara's influence extended to the Middle East, where his revolutionary ideals inspired various anti-imperialist and anti-colonial movements. Guevara's firm stance against U.S. intervention in the region and his advocacy for the rights of oppressed peoples made him an important figure for those involved in struggles for independence and sovereignty. While Guevara did not have direct involvement in Middle Eastern politics, his ideas influenced revolutionary thought in the region, particularly among leftist groups that opposed foreign intervention and exploitation. Guevara's legacy in contemporary political movements. Che Guevara's legacy is not limited to the history of revolution, but continues to shape political discourse in the present day. His ideas have been adopted by various political movements that focus on the themes of social justice, anti-imperialism, and anti-capitalism. Guevara's revolutionary fervor and commitment to class struggle continue to resonate with political activists, particularly those who challenge neoliberal economic policies, austerity measures, and the influence of multinational corporations. In the 21st century, Guevara's ideals have inspired movements such as the Zapatista Army of National Liberation, EZLN in Mexico, which fights for the rights of indigenous peoples and against neoliberal economic policies. The Zapatistas, like Guevara, reject the capitalist system and advocate for a more just and equitable society. Guevara's influence is also seen in the broader anti-globalization movement, which criticizes the dominance of multinational corporations, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Trade Organization, WTO. Furthermore, Guevara's ideas have been integrated into contemporary movements for environmental justice and anti-imperialism. His critique of capitalist exploitation and his belief in the necessity of global revolution continue to inspire activists who fight against climate change, environmental degradation, and the capitalist forces that exacerbate global inequalities. The criticisms of Guevara's legacy. While Che Guevara remains an enduring symbol of resistance, his legacy is not without controversy. Critics of Guevara have pointed to the authoritarian elements of his ideology and his role in the establishment of the Cuban state after the revolution. Guevara's vision of revolution emphasized the centrality of a vanguard party to lead the masses, and his approach to governance in post-revolutionary Cuba was sometimes characterized as authoritarian. Guevara's belief in the necessity of ideological purity and his willingness to use violence against perceived enemies of the revolution have also been the subject of critique. Some argue that Guevara's commitment to armed struggle led to the repression of political dissidents in Cuba, and that his revolutionary ideals were sometimes in tension with the democratic values of political pluralism. Guevara's role in the execution of individuals deemed counter-revolutionaries during the early days of the Cuban Revolution has also been criticized for its harshness and lack of due process. However, despite these criticisms, Guevara's supporters argue that his vision for social transformation was motivated by a deep sense of moral responsibility and a commitment to the liberation of the oppressed. Guevara's willingness to sacrifice his life for his beliefs, and his consistent dedication to fighting imperialism and social injustice, remains a central part of his legacy. Conclusion: the enduring legacy of Che Guevara. Che Guevara's legacy is one of profound and lasting significance. His ideas about revolution, class struggle, imperialism, and the role of the individual in societal transformation continue to inspire people around the world. Guevara's image, his writings, and his actions have become symbols of resistance, particularly for those who seek social justice, equality, and liberation from oppression. From Latin America to Africa, Asia, and beyond, Guevara's influence has permeated revolutionary movements and social struggles. Whether in the form of guerrilla warfare, anti-imperialist resistance, or political activism, Che Guevara's legacy remains a beacon for those who believe in the possibility of creating a more just and equitable world. Despite the controversies surrounding his methods and ideals, his unwavering commitment to his vision of revolution and social change has cemented his place in history as one of the most iconic and influential figures of the 20th century.